All right, ready to dive in?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Today, we're tackling love languages, and
Big topic.
yeah, huge. Based on Gary Chapman's book, The Five Love Languages. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yeah, it's a classic, right?
It is. And for good reason. It can be a real game changer in how we understand and connect with, well, anyone we care about.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
How many times have we tried to show someone we love them, but it's like,
It just misses the mark.
totally, like we're putting in the effort, but it's not landing.
That's Chapman's whole point. We each have these love languages, ways we best receive and express love.
And just like spoken languages.
You're speaking French, and they only understand Swahili.
Exactly. Total miscommunication.
And it can lead to so much frustration in relationships, feeling unappreciated or like your partner just doesn't get you.
It's not about the intention, it's about the impact.
Right.
100%. So let's break down these 5 languages, starting with words of affirmation.
Okay, so this one's more than just liking compliments, right? Right. It's deeper than that.
For someone with this love language, words carry a lot of weight, good or bad.
It's about feeling seen, valued through those verbal expressions of.
Affirmation.
Exactly. Not just you look nice, but.
I really appreciate how you handled that situation.
Your laugh is my favorite sound. You know those specific, genuine affirmations?
That hit different.
Yeah, they do.
Chapman actually shares this story in the book about a couple, Allison and Keith.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Allison was a writer, but.
She kind of lost her spark.
Exactly. Years into their marriage, Keith finds some of her old writing and is just blown away. And his enthusiastic praise.
It was all it took to rekindle that passion in her.
That's the power of words. It can be incredibly motivating, uplifting.
But flip that coin.
And those negative words can be devastating for someone with this language.
Criticism, insults, even just...
A lack of positive feedback.
You can leave lasting scars, you know? Makes you think about how many times we might have hurt loved ones with our words just because we didn't understand this.
It's a sobering thought.
It really is.
Okay, moving on to quality time. Man, this one's so relevant these days.
In our always-on, overscheduled world.
Exactly. It's so easy to be physically present, but
Mentally checked out, scrolling through your phone.
that doesn't count. It's about giving your undivided attention, being truly present with the other person.
And this can look different for different folks.
Right. Some crave those deep conversations. Others connect through shared activities.
Chapman talks about this couple, Bill and Betty Jo, who kept clashing because Bill just didn't get Betty Jo's need for quality time.
Bill thought, I'm working hard, providing for the family, that's enough, right?
But Betty Jo felt neglected. It wasn't about the money. It was about that feeling of connection and that lack of quality time.
Bred resentment.
Yeah, classic example of speaking different love languages.
Highlights how crucial it is to understand what quality time looks like for your partner.
Is it an hour of uninterrupted conversation after dinner?
Maybe it's a hike together, no phones allowed.
Or even just reading in the same room, enjoying each other's presence.
It's about that intentional togetherness.
And Chapman gets into personality types here, which is fascinating.
The Dead Sea personality, content with silence.
Versus the babbling brook, who just flows with words.
Imagine those two trying to have quality time.
Oh, it can be hilarious.
But also a recipe for disaster if they're not understanding each other's styles.
Exactly. And it brings us back to that point about effort. It takes work to speak each other's love language, especially when you're starting from such different places.
Absolutely. Okay, on to the third language, receiving gifts.
Now, this isn't about being materialistic or demanding expensive presents.
It's about the thought, the effort behind the gesture.
It's that message of, I was thinking of you, I care about you, expressed in a tangible way.
Chapman actually talks about the anthropology of gift-giving.
Fascinating stuff.
He found it's a universal expression of love across cultures.
He even has this story about doing research in Dominica. Yeah, and this local named Fred welcomes him with a freshly picked green coconut.
A coconut?
Simple, right? But it perfectly embodies this love language. It's not about the coconut itself.
It's the thoughtfulness behind it.
That feeling of being seen, remembered, appreciated through that tangible token.
And it's important to understand what kind of gift-giving resonates with your partner.
Some people love those little things, like a surprise coffee on a Tuesday morning.
While others might cherish a grand gesture for a special occasion.
It's the personalized meaning that matters.
Absolutely. And Chapman tells the story about Janice and Jim.
Oh yeah, their marriage was struggling, right?
Big time. And Jim goes to one of Chapman's seminars. realizes Janice's love language is receiving gifts.
which he'd been totally neglecting.
So he commits to giving her a gift every day for a week.
I love that.
Talk about a commitment. It was a big shift for him, but the impact on Janice?
Huge. It didn't magically fix everything, but it was like,
A jump start.
yeah, it showed her he cared in the language she understood. And it opened the door for them to start rebuilding their connection.
It's a reminder that sometimes those small, consistent gestures can really make a difference.
Especially when they're speaking the right love language.
Exactly. It's not always about grand romantic gestures. It's about the everyday acts of love.
Speaking of which, ready for our next love language?
Hit me with it.
It's acts of service.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't appreciate it when someone does something helpful for them?
Right. It's about actions speaking louder than words.
Taking something off your partner's plate, showing you care by...
Lightening the load.
Exactly. Chapman has this funny story about a couple, Mark and Mary.
Oh, yeah, the ones who...
Both had this love language, and they kept clashing because each felt the other wasn't.
Pulling their weight around the house.
Yes.
See, they were both showing love through acts of service, but...
in ways that weren't really meeting each other's needs.
Right. Like, Mark might be cleaning the garage, thinking he's being super helpful.
While Mary's over there drowning in laundry, wishing he'd just...
Lend a hand with the folding.
It's like they were speaking different dialects of the same language.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they actually talked about their specific needs, what acts of service really mattered to each of them.
That they finally started speaking the same language, so to speak.
Such a good point. This one can be so nuanced. What's an act of service to one person?
Might not be to another. It's not about assuming.
It's about asking, what can I do to help?
Is there anything I can take off your plate today?
Sometimes the smallest things mean the most,
Making the bed, packing their lunch.
Picking up the dry cleaning. It's the thoughtfulness.
And this love language can be especially tricky with all those.
Societal expectations around gender roles.
Exactly. Chapman talks about how those stereotypes can load to so many misunderstandings. One partner expecting the other to handle all the household chores just because.
Of their gender.
Yeah. And if that's not their partner's primary love language.
It's going to create tension.
Big time.
Yeah.
It's so important to talk about those expectations.
Break free from those limiting stereotypes.
Absolutely. Okay, ready to explore the final love language.
I think so, yeah. This one's often.
Misunderstood.
Yeah, oversimplified. But it's powerful. Physical touch.
And as you said, it's not just about...
Intimacy.
Right. It's broader than that. It's any physical contact that conveys love, affection, connection.
A warm hug.
Holding hands.
A kiss on the cheek.
Even just a reassuring pat on the back.
For someone whose primary language is physical touch.
Those gestures can be so powerful.
They really can.
And it's interesting, Chapman points out that touch can be just as powerful negatively as it can be positive.
Yeah, he does.
Like a harsh touch, an unwelcome touch.
Can be hurtful.
While a tender, loving touch.
Especially during times of stress or sadness.
Can be incredibly comforting.
So true.
I remember when my son was little, we were in a hotel room, and he woke me up by jumping right on me.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he meant well. It was a loving gesture, but
startling.
Totally. It made me realize how even well-intentioned touch can be.
Misinterpreted.
Yeah, or even uncomfortable for some people.
It goes back to that individual sensitivity.
Our comfort levels, our boundaries around touch, they're all so different.
Shaped by our experiences, our backgrounds.
Communication is key.
Absolutely. Understanding your partner's preferences, their boundaries.
And finding ways to express affection through touch that feel good for both of you.
It's about being attuned to those nonverbal cues.
Yeah. This whole discussion about love languages has really got me thinking about the difference between falling in love and staying in love. Chapman talks about that a lot.
He does, yeah.
It's like we often associate love with those intense,
butterflies in your stomach feelings.
Exactly, that initial infatuation. But those feelings, they inevitably
fade over time.
Right. And that doesn't mean love is gone. It's just
evolving.
You're right. So how do we navigate that? How do we keep the love alive when that initial spark starts to
dwindle?
Yeah.
That's where love languages come in. They give us that framework
for nurturing the relationship.
Even when things aren't so
romantic and exciting.
Exactly. It's about those conscious choices to show love, even when we're
busy,
stressed,
or just not feeling it.
Chapman tells this really powerful story about Pete and Patsy.
Oh, yeah, the couple on the verge of
divorce.
Yeah. They had it all. Shared values, common interests,
But they were miserable.
and the root of it all.
Unmet needs for physical touch. It was Pete's primary love language, and Patsy wasn't speaking it.
She was busy with work, and she just assumed.
That he knew how she felt.
But Pete felt neglected, withdrawn. That lack of affection created this.
Huge rift between them.
And it wasn't until they went to counseling, learned about love languages.
That they finally understood the problem.
It's such a good example of how we can think we're communicating love, but
If we're not speaking the right language.
it's falling on deaf ears.
Exactly. And Chapman stresses this throughout the book. Love is a choice.
It's not just a feeling, it's
An action.
a decision we make every day to
Nurture our relationships.
and to show up for our partners
even when it's hard.
when we're tired, frustrated,
Choosing to speak their language, even when it feels
unnatural.
awkward.
He tells another amazing story about Anne and Glenn.
Oh, they were having some serious...
Marital problems.
Yeah, big time. Anne was ready to call it quits.
But then,
She decided to try one last thing.
what was that?
Speaking Glenn's love languages.
Which were.
Acts of service and quality time.
So even though she was feeling hurt, resentful,
She started making small gestures.
like
Packing his lunch. Offering to help with projects around the house.
and for quality time,
She started making time for them to connect, even if it was just for a few minutes each day.
and those consistent efforts
Speaking his language, even when she didn't necessarily feel like it.
started to chip away at that wall between them.
Didn't solve everything overnight, but
It created space for them to start rebuilding.
it's such a powerful example of how choosing to love, even when it's hard.
Can make a real difference.
Exactly.
And speaking of choosing love, what about our kids?
Ah, yes, the little ones.
Do they have love languages too?
Chapman says absolutely yes.
Right.
And understanding those languages is so crucial for...
Effective parenting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they might not be able to articulate it like adults, but...
They definitely feel and respond to different expressions of love.
Right. So how do those languages show up in kids?
I'm curious to hear this.
Well, think about it. A child whose primary language is physical touch, they might constantly want
Hugs.
to be held. They just thrive on that physical closeness.
And for a child whose language is words of affirmation,
They might just light up when you praise their efforts, you know?
give them that verbal encouragement.
They need to hear those words to feel seen and valued.
Makes sense.
And a kid whose language is receiving gifts.
Presence.
Right. They get excited about those even if they're small or inexpensive.
It's not about them.
Material value.
Yeah, it's that tangible symbol of love.
Exactly.
What about acts of service? How does that play out with kids?
Well, they might love to help out with chores.
Really?
Yeah. Or tasks around the house.
Huh, interesting.
Makes them feel included, useful, like they're contributing.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then, of course, there's the kids whose language is quality time.
Oh, I can imagine.
They crave your undivided attention.
They want you to be
Fully present with them, whether you're
playing a game,
reading a book.
just talking about their day.
Mhm.
They need that focused connection to feel
Secure.
loved,
Absolutely. And it's so important, just like with adult relationships.
to pay attention to those cues.
Figure out what makes your child feel truly loved.
Because just like with adults, if those love language needs aren't met,
It can lead to issues.
they might act out,
Withdraw.
struggle to form healthy relationships.
It's a reminder that love isn't one size fits all.
Nope. It's about understanding those individual needs and...
Speaking the right language.
Exactly.
So how do we actually go about discovering our own love language?
And those of our loved ones.
Chapman has some great advice on that.
Okay, I'm all ears.
He says start with yourself.
Okay.
Really think about what makes you feel most loved and appreciated.
Okay.
What are those things your partner does or says that just make your heart sing?
I like that, yeah.
It's about tuning in to those moments when you feel that,
Warm below.
yeah, that warmth, that recognition.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
sparked it?
Was it a compliment that really resonated?
Thoughtful gift.
Someone going out of their way to help me with something.
Or maybe just spending quality time together.
Or a hug. A really good hug.
Exactly. And on the flip side,
Yeah.
think about the things that tend to hurt you the most.
Oh, that's interesting.
That could be a big clue about what love language you might be missing.
Like, if I get really upset when my partner forgets my birthday.
That might suggest receiving gifts is important to you.
Huh.
He also talks about looking back at what you frequently requested from your partner.
So like those things you nag about.
Well, maybe not nagging, but those repeated requests that might have come across as,
Criticism.
yeah, those are often a sign of unmet love language needs.
Wow. Makes you
that
realize
sometimes what we perceive as annoying in our partners
is actually just their way of trying to express love.
or asking for it.
So it's like a two-way street. We need to understand their language, but we also need to make sure they understand ours.
Exactly. And once you have a better grasp of your own love language,
Then what?
then you can start observing, understanding the languages of those around you.
Pay attention to how they express love.
What makes them light up? What makes them feel appreciated?
I like that. It's almost like a detective game.
It can be, but it's a fun one with a big payoff.
Wow.
Deeper, more fulfilling relationships.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's say we've done the work,
Yeah,
figured out our love languages, making an effort to speak our partner's language. Things are feeling more harmonious.
that's great.
But what about those lingering hurts from the past?
Ah, yes. The baggage we all carry,
It's like those times when our love language wasn't spoken.
or maybe even used against us.
Right. How do we move past that?
That's a great question. And Chapman doesn't shy away from that complexity. He acknowledges those past hurts can leave deep scars.
It's like they create this barrier, makes it hard to fully embrace the concept of love languages.
They can, but he also emphasizes that love, at its core, is about choice.
Taurus.
We can choose to forgive, to release those past hurts, and move forward. It's not about forgetting or condoning the actions, but recognizing that holding on to resentment,
Just hurts us more.
exactly, it
Yeah.
poisons us. It prevents us from fully connecting.
So it's a choice we make for ourselves as much as for the relationship.
I think so, yeah. It's about choosing to heal, both
Yeah.
individually and as a couple.
He tells this story about Brent and Becky.
Oh, yeah, they were
Headed for divorce.
on the brink. Brent felt totally disconnected, unloved.
Their love tanks were running on empty.
They were. And Chapman encourages Brent to give it another shot,
To really explore this whole love languages thing.
to see if they could rekindle that spark.
Did it work?
It was a long process, lots of ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
As they started learning each other's languages, something shifted. Brent realized that the love he was seeking outside the marriage,
It was just a Band-Aid.
yeah, temporary fix for that void of unmet needs. But by choosing to love Becky, to speak her love language,
He rediscovered that connection.
the one they'd lost sight of,
That's amazing.
it shows that even when things seem hopeless,
There's still hope.
there's always a chance for healing, for reconnection.
And it takes work
It does. Love requires effort, intentionality,
and forgiveness.
both for ourselves and our partners.
Man, we've covered a lot of ground today. 5 love languages.
The nuances of each.
How understanding and speaking these languages can really transform our relationships.
We talked about the difference between falling in love and staying in love.
And how choosing love is an ongoing process.
It's a journey, not a destination.
So well said. So, what does this all mean for you, dear listener?
What have you learned about yourself today?
About the people you care about most?
Maybe you've realized you've been speaking the wrong love language,
Or maybe you've discovered your own language for the first time.
and it's given you this new understanding of your needs, your desires.
What if you started speaking your loved one's love languages more intentionally,
What positive changes might you see? Less conflict,
more understanding?
a deeper sense of connection. Think about those possibilities.
This has been such a rich conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about love languages.
And listeners, remember, it's not just about understanding these concepts. It's about putting them into action. Observe.
Experiment.
Communicate.
Because, as we've learned today, love is a powerful force.
It can truly transform our lives. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
Happy loving.